Okay, here we go. Once again, I think this is my third little live stream now, and a little bit different today. This is an older track that I recreated a little while ago, and actually the reason I thought I would go into this one in a little bit of detail, apart from it being different style to the last ones, it was quite interesting. I had to mess about with it yesterday. After so many years, I came to remix this a little bit with some new tools and so on, and realised that I'd made a mistake in recreating one of my own songs, which is quite a funny thing. But we'll get into that in a minute. What I'm going to do is just play a bit of the track, just to show you. We have a little bit of mastering stuff on, well, I say mastering, a little bit of tweaking going on the main outputs here. So just to bear that in mind when you're listening, and that's really just the whole point of this. Is not for it's not for anything else other than a quick listen through. So I'm not going to go into massive detail. This won't be one of those big 1 hour long videos. This will be a much shorter one, hopefully, anyway. Although whatever, doesn't really matter, does it? We'll see what happens. So I'm going to play you a bit of the song right now while I just pass the links on through the usual sources, and then we'll come back and take it to pieces. Tune's called Sharing Your Love, and it's a rock tune. It was written in 1981. It goes like this. Okay, so yeah, that's the basics. One of those things, isn't it? When you write songs when you're younger, they all tend to go on for the, rest of the millennium, or the rest of the whatever. Yeah, so there's more to it than this. There's a little slow bit in the middle.
Maybe we're hiding something, or are we the same? When we should be deciding something, all we do is carry on with the game.
So there's the big solo section. So on. And just quickly to explain, I suppose, when we got to this solo section. Actually, yeah, no, what I'll do is I'll leave that. Let's just quickly dissect the instrumentation. Pretty straightforward. Obviously, this song was written quite a while ago, so it was written on guitar, and it was written with a riff which goes kind of basically like this. Here we go. Now, interestingly, if you listen to that riff, you can kind of hear what I was about to explain then in the solo section, which is for me what made this track a little bit of a standout track compared to, you know, the others, and that's why I decided to recreate it. I've got the studio version, incidentally, here that we did in 1982. Yeah. Yeah, it's, oh, I left the original, I left my recreation on there. Let's hear that again. So obviously we were, I think it was the first or second time ever in the studio at this point, so everything's tons faster, as it always used to be. So when I recreated the song, I did it a little bit more laid back in the tempo side. So anyway, getting to what I was about to say, the point here being that this guitar part actually works in two different tempos, or two, no, let's not call it tempos, two different signatures. Two different signatures, so, or meters. So you've got the main one, which is here. And what I also did was, I think somewhere here we'll find after this slow part, where is it? Roughly maybe here. So basically the same riff works as a kind of shuffly feel, and it also works as a straight 4/4, and the whole point was to transition between the two for this middle section. And when we did it live, obviously not only does it just transition, but the tempo changes as well to ease that transition, and actually that whole little piece became a little bit irrelevant and barely noticeable after we'd done the song for a while. But anyway, so let's just quickly dissect what I've done to recreate it. Once again, a quick sip of water. So here's the intro. We've got obviously the little faded in guitar parts at the beginning. So that was something, the reverse guitar thing, that was something that came up at the studio, and as I mentioned previously as well, obviously there was only me playing guitar, but something that I dropped on very early on back in the studio days, and this came from hearing this kind of song being played by people like Judas Priest and you know, those kind of rocky groups, and they always had excuse me, they always had their two guitar players panned left and right. AC/DC, even Status Quo, you could say, Rick Parfitt on one side and Rossi on the other. And I always loved that sound of when two guitars were doing something simultaneously, pretty much the same. And quite often you'd find that there's a third one in the center, so that was my third one there. Oops. So that's that really. That was the whole premise of that. It came from the original riff. The guitars in this particular track, UAD, it's the Marshall, which is exactly what I had back in the day, and all three of them, I believe, or maybe the third one. Yeah, the third one is because it's a lot less kind of aggressive. So that's the guitars. Put them together. Send them up a group, and then we've got the usual SSL, and I've got the this is a Precision K stereo, which at the time I used to use quite a lot for kind of over these kind of overall channels of stereo-y stuff. So here's a quick listen without. Just sets up the widening of the stereo a little bit more, and you can see there's the mid and side. And I was actually thinking I should pull the mid back up a little bit on this one anyway. So there we go. So that's the guitars. There's quite a lot of different parts, as I've already explained on this, but the basics are that those two guitars plus the center one play all the way through. And then apart from this little breakdown bit, which I haven't actually played yet, so let's just have a listen to that bit so we know where we're... Just play this to the end actually, because we're coming up to the solo section, the keyboard solo.
When we don't know where we stand.
Okay, so I probably should have just played the whole track, shouldn't I, right from the start, but as it's 7 minutes long, I didn't really want to go through the whole thing. Anyway, okay, so there's the guitars, like I said, all the way through. You'll notice that there was a solo guitar. Let's just have a quick listen to the sound of that. And that's guitar rig, and it's my Schenker sound, as I've mentioned on the previous couple of videos. Michael Schenker's big hero of mine, and a lot of the playing style that I got, even though I don't actually play this kind of music very often these days, my guitar playing is still heavily influenced by a lot of his little scales and his style. And I've just dropped on, editing up this sound. The key to it was the Crybaby wah wah, which as you can see, that's been automated there. Quite possibly there was too much automation and it should have just been, but the key with that was this wah-wah thing being held right back, as if you just kind of put your foot on it and step back a little bit, and you get that kind of honky sound. Pretty heavy on the distortion, and I think I used my Flying V as well for that solo. I can't remember now whether it was the Variax in like a Telecaster mode or something. Anyway, so that's the solo, and there's a little bit there where there was two solos, a left and righty thing, which is something that happened by accident in the studio. When we recorded the song originally, I think I did 2 takes, and the engineer, John, I still remember him very well, decided to do both, although one of them was not a very good take, but it just added a little something, so I recreated that as well. Okay, so that's my parts, the guitars. The vocals, nothing special really on this one at all. It was just in the days of yelling out one note.
When we both know it's E, you want me. I'm sharing your love with a little less for me.
Yeah, there's not much to report on the vocal side really there. API on the input, I wanted a bit of distortion because I wanted it to sound old. We've got a doubler there, we've got JJP as well, and then a little multi-tap delay from Steinberg, which basically, there's lots of items that do this, but I just really like this one. It's really simple. There's nothing clever in it in this particular instance, but what it will do is it will duck. So as you can probably tell, let's find a bit where there's plenty of singing, and then you'll hear what I mean.
Love with a little less for me.
You can hear there that it's an old thing that we used to have to work to do with side chaining, was to stop the delays from happening while the vocal is happening, and then when the vocal stops, the delay will come in, and now you can do that automatically with the ducker. All right, so that's that. So let's move on to bass and drums. So in the original demo, we had my good friend Andy Jones playing drums, and bass part was Steve Levitt. So here we are.
I'm sharing.
So that was that. Ooh, we've still got everything else on here. Okay, yeah. So drums Andy Jones, bass Steve Levitt. What I did basically was just play, and this took quite a while. I played everything back in. It's Superior Drummer, and it's probably one of the nicest bits of drum programming I've done for quite a while. I spent a lot of time on this, especially some of the little subtle bits, and we haven't got time to go into it all in detail right now, but I'm just going to skip through. Yeah, so that gives you an idea of the drums. Excuse me, it's Superior Drummer, version 3. The original recreation that I did wasn't version 3, but I've recently kind of swapped everything over to this. Just changed that kick drum as well. It might be a little bit over the top, but I actually really like it like that, especially when you get to these slow bits. Yeah, I imagine we used to play that actually faster than that. I don't know if the original part is still around there. Yeah, anyhow, so here we go. So that was the drums. Bass, I think I'm just using Omnisphere for this one. And it's the picked Rock P bass with a few effects on it, which we'll get to in a minute. So let's hear them both together, drums and bass. very simple. We've got two groups here. We've got the drum group, which has my Alicia on it, which I don't know, the last couple of tunes I've done, I've been using that. Empirical Labs Distresser actually over the whole drums on this one. And then on the bass, we've got my usual CLA. And then a compressor, which we'll get to in a second, because that's quite an important one. And the bass itself has nothing on this side. That should be VSTs only, yeah. So let's go back there. Yes, okay. So there's just a couple of things. That's actually the old drum channels, so I'm not using those now. Right. So let's move on. So we got the bass and drums sounding. And then what I've done, as usual, is I've got drums and bass sent to a group over here called bass and drums. And then we've got a distressor on there as well. And as I was explaining last time, distressor has a mix knob, which means you can get the kind of equivalent to a parallel compression, which means you're hearing some of the dry signal, the uncompressed signal, and some of the compressed signal. And with drums and bass, I don't want to take too much edge off, so it's just, as you can see, it's just, you know, over that area there. Let's just hear it with fully on and fully off, and maybe with the streaming you might be able to hear the difference. Yeah, you can definitely hear the difference there, and you can hear why I wouldn't want it to be fully round like that. So yeah, a bit over the top, probably could do with tweaking the levels as usual. My levels always seem to end up a little bit hot. I don't worry too much about it, to be honest, but I know I probably should, especially when I'm doing little videos like this. But anyway, who watches it, huh? So finally, the final little trick here, which is again something, don't want to be, you know, telling you guys stuff that you already know, but there's always room for some kind of going over things that you already know, or learning something new if you didn't know it already. So what we've got here is we've got bass, and down here we've got a kick drum channel. Sorry. There's the kick drum channel, sorry. Yeah, I've just flicked things over here. I mean, it should be there. All right, let's hear that again. No. So that's the kick on its own. All right, that's basically what I was trying to get at. Note to self, need to prepare a little bit more in advance for these videos, because there's little things like that. What happened there was I saved this earlier on with the groups, the kick groups over to the left of the mixer here, and I forgot to update that little configuration. So when I brought the configuration back, the kick ended up back on this side, which is why I lost it. Right, so we've got the kick on its own. Actually it sounded great with the kick just mixed into the group, because obviously all the mixing's been done in Superior Drummer itself, so there's really no need to bring it out separately. So why did I do that? Well, the reason I did that is because I just felt that in places it was getting a bit busy, the kick drum, the bottom end of the drums, and the bass. So what do? Well, we add a compressor to the bass. But the actual chaining of the compression is done from the kick drum. Very easily done in most DAW hosts these days, and in Cubase they've now got this lovely little feature where you can just add a sidechain input. So what do? You add that, you go to add, you'll find, you know, the channel that you want to trigger the compressor, which in this case was the kick drum. It's already there, S3 and 4L, and the compressor itself is on the bass. So basically what you'll see now is if I play the kick, if I play the bass and the drums together, you'll see that the drums are, or the kick drum from the drums, are pushing down the bass. So every time there's a kick, you'll get less bass. get the idea. Again, with the streaming stuff, sometimes this is not quite as obvious as it should be. I've just undone that, by the way. It's a lovely feature of Cubase, the mixer history. You can see everything I've done there since we loaded up. And you can undo it all, which is awesome. So yeah, I've put that back to how it was when we started. There we go. Now, to me at the moment, listening to that, the bass sounds a little heavy still. However, I've got headphones on, and I did this on monitors just now, and it sounded okay. So I think I'm just going to leave that. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Also, the headphones I've got on are new. I've got the Bayer DT8080s because my old Sennheisers, the cable decided to give way the other day. My old Sennheiser HD265, which I love, but I've ordered another cable, but you know how long these things take at the moment. Right, so that's bass and drums. That's Steve Levitt and Andy Jones, faithfully recreated. A little bit of stuff that's probably not quite as faithful, but see, and little things like that, that's nice there, the way the bass slides in. Let's hear that. Little bits of realism, and the other little things is there's little tweaks that are made afterwards, as I always mention about the drums and bass. This particular bit's quite nice, if I remember rightly. And those are the things that a normal bass player and drummer would eventually do after you start playing a song live. You know, we didn't have it on our studio version because we'd not played the song live very often, at least. So okay, let's steam through. So we're onto the keyboard arrangement now, which was down to my very good friend, and still is, Tim Lofthouse. Hi Tim, if you're listening. And I would love to have got Tim to actually just play this stuff for me, but he's a busy lad. So basically, back in those days, yep, it was the little mini Moog. It was a Fender Rhodes and whatever you could use to make a kind of organ effect. We didn't have. I don't think Tim had a full Hammond in those days. Not that I remember, anyway. And I think I would remember because we would have had to lift it. So you've got the riff to be played along with the guitar, which goes like this. And you can see underneath the riff there, there's a filter on it. So it's the Moog multi-mode once again, and it's all automated too. And I think I just played through this and manually did it, as you can see. You can see by the way this automation is all drawn in, look. You can see that it's quite random, there's no kind of set points. So we've got that, we've got the Hammond to go along with it. And the Rhodes, which is a Lounge Lizard. Now, some of these parts might not be perfectly accurate to what Tim used to play, but I think most of them are. So the sounds for that, well, the synth sound in this particular case, I've got an Omnisphere again, and this is, I think it's the bass, yeah. The Hammond here, normally I would use the Native Instruments one, but in this case I used Hallion Sonic. It's a nice little rock drawbar organ, very basic, and the Rhodes is Lounge Lizard as always. So that's the basic keyboard entity, and most importantly is, we've got the string. Yeah, we've got this little string breakdown bit in the middle, which I just used my own creative license. I've got a mellotron there, and I think it's a mellotron from Omnisphere, and some warm strings from Omnisphere. These days for mellotron, I would use the Arturia one. But for this, didn't need to. The only difference really is the Arturia one has much more, it's an actual mellotron, whereas the Omnisphere, there's mellotron samples in there, but you have to kind of fiddle about to get them how you want them. So. So you notice the little swingy ride cymbal thing there. I would never have thought of that. That was something that Andy did on the original, so I tried to copy it. Yeah, so that was that. So let's get on. The final thing really on the keyboard side is the solo sound, which comes in a couple of times. There's a little bit here. And as it says, classic Moog lead, or Moog if you want to be pedantic. So here's the solo at the end. This was basically copied from what Tim played originally, and phenomenal player, still is. And I did my best to recreate it, not note for note, but some of the little runs, for instance this one here. That's pretty much what Tim did. The main... That did a little, and that came from the days when we were young and we were playing around, playing together. I was playing guitar and he was playing his keys, and I would play little, trick riffs like that. All the things that all young guitar players do. And Tim figured out he could play the same thing, actually probably much more interestingly than I did. So he used to incorporate those little bits into his solos, along with stuff that can really only be done on keyboard, like this. And things like that, which again, this is the stuff that really lives on to me. Was back in those days, even, Tim and myself, we were coming up with little melodies rather than just playing a load of notes. Yes, there were a load of notes in the solos like that, but there was also the little catchy melody part that people would remember. Like this. So, yeah, and like I said, I was actually surprised to see there once again, well, not surprised, I guess is the wrong word, Omnisphere being used for everything. And in fact, if you look at the whole structure of this track, let's find, basically got 1, 2, 3, 4 instruments being used, 4 MIDI VST instruments. That is the old Superior Drummer, which I am literally just using for oops, for the rim shot. For the rim shot that comes in the quiet part that you heard just now. Omnisphere is being used for bass. The Moog thing that you heard earlier, I don't think there's, oh yeah, there's the strings. There's some more strings. There's the lead, and I think, yeah, maybe that Mellotron 3, yeah, number 3 on Omnisphere. So it's that one there. That's, yeah, of course it is. Then the Lounge Lizard, Hallion Sonic, which is also multi-timbral, but it's only being used for one thing, and of course the drums. So that's it, really. And then the audio, you've got the 3 guitars, the solos, and the little bits of vocals. So, okay, we're just about there. So let's get to a couple of little really interesting things that I wanted to mention. So, all right, so I've got these little delay bits. If you have a listen here.
Thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
And the same thing on the guitar here. So what was interesting about this? Okay, and there's one more there. Let's just hear that one. What was interesting about this was these delays are actually done using direct offline processing, and they're actually rendered to audio.
We stand.
And why is that necessary? Okay, so the reason for that is because you have a delay that's set up to do something quite extreme, like this part here.
When we don't know where we stand.
And the tempo changes. So let's see if we can quickly just demonstrate the problem with that. Let's put a delay. Let's listen to like one lead vocal.
This whole thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
All right, so we've got the lead vocal. Let's find the lead vocal track here.
This whole thing ends.
So what I'm going to do is put a silly amount of delay on it that you would never normally use, but I just want to make this really obvious. So let's use, let's try this one. So we'll put a large amount of delay, reverb. Let's see how that sounds. Important that we put the sync on.
This whole thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
Okay, so you already heard that there. I was going to try and keep it a secret until we got to the end, but yeah, okay, there we go. So, a normal delay.
You must know.
You can hear that. I've stopped the playback.
It's all planned.
But look what happens when we get to the tempo change.
The whole thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
See how you get that? You get that change in pitch. We'll make it carry on a bit longer, so it may be more obvious.
This whole thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
Actually, I know it sounds quite cool, and that effect I have used on deliberately in various places. But in this particular case, what you had was you had the delay from the vocal.
When we don't know where we stand.
Which obviously it's out of tune. It becomes out of tune with everything else.
You must know this whole thing ends when we don't know where we stand.
Now it'd be nice if it carried on going upwards, maybe until it disappeared, and that could be done. But in this case, all I wanted was just a simple delay. So what I did was just dragged this vocal part off somewhere where the tempo is set, actually pulled it back. You could have done that by turning the tempo off, rendered the delay that I liked, and then turned everything else back on. So what I ended up with was the delay rendered as a part, perfectly in tune, or at least as in tune as my vocal is. And the nice thing with the guitar delay was that I was able to chop it up and mess around with it a bit as well. So So that's that. Okay, so let's get to the final point on this, which I thought was quite interesting, and actually the reason why I decided to do this little stream in the first place. Okay, see if you can tell the difference. Here's the original track, all right? So let's find the bit I'm talking about.
It's not love.
And here is my original recreation,
It's not love.
which was 2013.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Okay, I'm not going to use this as a challenge, but can any you guys spot the difference?
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Yeah, all right. So you don't know the song as well as I do, as well as I thought I did, even though I wrote the song. But basically what I did is when I recreated it originally, the main riff is in E, and then it modulates upwards to, well, in this case, to F sharp.
When we both know it's not even meant to be. I'm sharing your love.
And I always thought I was a bit weird. I should have referred to my original studio recording from '82, of course, but you know, sometimes you just don't. So I always thought it was a bit weird that little...
I'm sharing.
I could never remember exactly how that was played. Since then, like I said, I found the original studio recording, but it never seemed quite right. And I was thinking, and I just got this up the other day while we were talking, you know, about doing live streams and things. And I was thinking, here's a song that might be interesting to live stream anyway, just a bit of it. And I found the original, pulled it in, and I thought, I've just realised why that all sounded so wrong, because on my original song, it's in F, it's not F sharp, so the riff is in E.
I need you. It's not love. When we both know it's not even meant to be.
And it goes up to F, not F sharp, and my version goes up to F sharp.
When we both know it's not.
Which actually sounds quite okay, to be honest. It doesn't, you know, it's just the problem I had with it was that little riff there.
I'm sharing.
Just never quite grabbed me compared to how it was originally.
Meant to be. I'm sharing.
There was something a little bit more mystique about that, I don't know. So, right, so I thought, right, I'm going to have to re-record everything. Hang on, what to do? Hang on a minute, no I'm not, it's 2020 now. We've got the tools to do this, plus it's a riff in single notes. I wonder if it's possible. So, how did I get that riff? In fact, not just the riff, the whole section.
When we both know it's not even meant to be. I'm sharing you.
How did I get that to become?
When we both know it's not even meant to be. I'm sharing.
You know, it's not just a case of cutting the track and raising everything or lowering everything, because the little run on the guitar is different. It's a different set of notes. You know, and you want that fluidity of everything still being its own individual part. So I don't want to just bounce the whole thing to audio and drop it from F sharp to F. So, quickly, how was it done? And those of you that are familiar with Cubase and the tools and so on will probably know how it's done. Those of you might not have seen this before, well, it might be interesting to see how it's possible. Now, bearing in mind that it's only one semitone, so that does help. If it was more, you know, it would be different. So obviously bass is easy. Bass is just a case of doing that. You know, there's no... So, you know, that's just a case of moving the notes. You can do that with MIDI. And of course, the whole point of moving this as well was that put it back to the key that it was originally written and played in, which is why half the notes were played like they were played. And not only that is you wouldn't want, for instance, in the little riff here, you wouldn't want that E to be a D sharp. Hang on, let's make it more obvious what it actually is. That sounds better to me, but physically impossible for me. This is all right on the octave on the bass, but actually that would be, because as you know, there is no bottom D sharp on a normal 4-string bass. So there's the riff that needed changing, and the whole pitch overall had to be moved from F sharp to F. So with the MIDI stuff, well, that's easy. Like I said, that's just a case of going in and selecting everything and moving it up or down from there to there. So we have easily done. So far we've got all the MIDI stuff done. But wait a minute, there's 3 guitars. Okay, once again, let's just pick one of them. We'll pick the one that's, it's not the best sound out of the 3 of them, but it's the one that's cleaner, so you can hear it. So here's the guitar, and here's the end result of the guitar, let's put it that way. Now that part was simple. Again, it's just like the MIDI. You just literally select the part. Here is how it was originally. Transpose button up here, you see. But I needed it there. Whoops. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. No wonder that wasn't working. I was going to say, only on a live stream. There we go. You can choose the algorithm here. Some of these algorithms actually work better, but for me it didn't matter. There's 3 guitars, and that did the job. So all three of them individually are chopped and then transposed down. However, as I mentioned earlier, when we got to the riff part, it's a completely different riff. The original was... Sorry, here we go. So that was the original riff, and here's what I had in F sharp. It's completely different, but I want it to be like the original was, and I don't want to play it all again because I don't even remember what guitar I used for this particular thing. You know, again, there's something to be learnt there that you could maybe consider. Probably most real professionals do this, making a note, you know, in the track there, instead of just calling it Git C, center guitar, you could call it guitar center variax telecaster model, new strings, coffee spilt on the floor next to it, etc., so that you could recreate it for later. Probably a lot of people do that. Maybe they do. Let me know in the comments if you do. So anyway, let's put an end to this. So here comes the wonders of Cubase's Very Audio. Again, there's lots of different ways to do this with different tools. I use the built-in ones because they just work so well and they're integrated into Cubase. So there is my little guitar riff. And I don't think I can just put this back to how it was to show you, but it was something, I think it was something along the lines of F sharp, and that was, whoops, that was down there, I believe. I can't actually remember. Let's just move them around randomly, you get the idea. You see what I mean? So, you know, chopping those individual notes up and moving them to new notes, because it's just a single noted riff. Now, that all sounds a bit weird now, but when you put it together, let's just put these all back where they should be. That's still not right, is it? There we are. I think we're there now. Yeah. So basically, thanks to Very Audio, I didn't do any tuning as such. I didn't do any of the straightening of curves or shifting, you know, formants or any of the quantizing of pitches or anything like that. But just chopped up each individual note, which actually I think they came up quite accurately, and then just moved them into the correct place. And so what you ended up there with was this. Now, if this was a beautiful, clean guitar sound, it might be problematic, but because it's all distorted and supposed to sound a bit rough and ready, end result wasn't the problem. Okay, so we've got that far, that's great. What about the little vocal part? Once again, here's the original. Let's turn that off. So that's the F sharp one, and here is my recreated F version. And that, to me, sounds absolutely fine. Once again, if it was a beautiful, pristine vocal, it might be different. So what did I do? Okay, well, you probably guessed already. Very similar thing. There's the part in Very Audio.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Now, the only thing I found with this was that because I'd lowered it by a semitone, the whole thing, it made my voice sound deeper, obviously, but it's what we call the formant had changed. So, you know, for instance, if you speed up your voice and it sounds like Mickey Mouse, the formant, you could speed up your voice and then change the formant, and you know, you wouldn't really know that there was a big pitch change there. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's have a listen to this. Let's take it down a couple more notes.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Actually, let's just go back 1 second and we'll just do one of them so you can hear it really clearly.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Now that sounds a little bit weird when it's on its own. But what I've done there is I've got the formant lifted up by +6. So if I put that back to normal with the take all the formant and change it back to 0.
And we both know it's not even meant to be.
You can see that only by just one semitone of movement my voice starts to sound like I'm trying to put on a deep voice, which is not me at all. It sounds like Rick Astley, which is great if you're Rick Astley. And not only that, is it didn't match the vocal part before. So, okay, so I've lowered the pitch by a semitone, but then we raise the formant so that you still retain that kind of, you know, same area of nasaliness or whatever you want to call it, especially with my voice. So here's the formant being raised.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
There's an extreme example.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Now all this sounds a bit weird when you're listening to it like this.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
All sounds a bit odd. Even the small amounts can sound a bit odd.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
But what you have to bear in mind there is that you kind of, even though you don't know me maybe and you don't know the song, you've already got that voice in your head.
When we both know.
So any movement of that is going to sound a little bit weird, but you have to bear in mind that if you heard that like this for the first time,
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
you would be forgiven for thinking that that's just somebody's normal singing voice, has a bit of an odd nasally vibe to a singing voice. So anyway, back to the point, I elected to stick with +6 on the formant, and I felt that that brought the kind of tonal character of the voice back to how it was when it was actually originally sung a semitone higher.
When we both know it's not even meant to be.
Now, I'm not saying by any means that it's perfect, and if it was a ballad or something, you know, much more critical listening, or of course if it was being recorded for use, you know, other than people just listening to it on SoundCloud, I would definitely just sing it again, you know. And the same with the guitars. I'd play the whole guitars again, not just that little part. I'd play the whole part from start to finish, you know. But in this case, it was a bit of an experiment to see if it could be done, which I kind of knew it could be done. And it was also something that I thought would be interesting to demo on the live stream. So let's have a quick listen.
It's not love. When we both know it's not even meant to be. When we both know it's not.
I thought there was something slightly wrong there. You guys were all probably saying, he's going to forget that he's done that. Well, there you go. Right, and still to me that vocal doesn't sound quite right. Is it because I've forgotten something else since doing the little demo bit?
Meant to be. When we both know.
Can you see how that sounds?
When we both know it's not even meant to.
That's very odd.
When we both know it's not even meant to be. When we both know it's not even meant to be.
let's just hear one of the others, because I've done all of these, obviously, that was the other thing. I was very tempted to copy the guitar to there and copy it, you know, across to the other parts that are the same. But with it being a real kind of song rather than a dance track or a pop track, all the guitars and everything were all played through in one go. There's no copies and pastes. And so I thought I would do the alterations on all the parts as well, rather than just copying them through. So let me just check. I'll just check this. Yeah, that'll do. And then there's one more over here somewhere, I think. So there you go. That was a little bit of fun, I guess, really. Listening to an old track there. I hope one or two of the guys who were involved with this originally might come across it at some point. I was really happy with the result, especially because, like I said, it was one of my old songs from when I was young, and we all love that, don't we? And on top of that, now that I've got this template back up again, it means that obviously there was a whole set full of songs, and it means that I can pretty much use this as a template for sounds, drum sounds and bass and guitar and everything, and you know, maybe do a couple of the others. But the main thing here was just to show how the whole thing was put together. There's a few little things that you might not have come across before. The summing of the drums and bass, the compressor with the side chain, how easy that is to be done these days, and of course the changing of the pitch of some of the vocal parts. So let's play out, as it were, and try and think of something to do next time. Here is the solo to finish the track, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.